Welcome to the European Association for Higher Education Advancements YouTube and podcast channel. We're diving deep today into how to make lectures dynamic and engaging.
It's really exciting stuff.
So you're prepping for this big lecture, right? And you don't want the students to be checking their phones every 5 seconds.
Definitely not. And luckily, we've got this awesome guide from the European Association for Higher Education Advancement.
It's packed with practical tips, which I love. It's not just theory. It's about what we can actually DO in the classroom.
Exactly. Like right off the bat, they talk about the power of warm-up activities.
Oh, that's so true. I remember this one professor who always started class with a quick poll or a funny anecdote. It just woke everyone up and got us in the mood to learn.
Makes such a difference. The guide actually talks about how those first few minutes are super important.
Why is that? Is it just about grabbing attention?
Well, that's part of it, but there's also a cognitive psychology element here. Attention spans are, not infinite. And first impressions really matter.
So a strong start can actually prime students' brains for learning.
Exactly. It's like you're setting the stage for their brains to engage with the material. You're piquing their interest.
I like that analogy. Instead of just diving headfirst into, the French Revolution, you're creating anticipation.
Right. And it doesn't have to be complicated. Ask a thought-provoking question like, what would make you revolt?
Or show a picture that sparks curiosity.
Or tell a story, even a short one, that connects to the topic.
And that instantly gets students thinking and participating instead of just passively listening. Okay, so warm-up activities check. What else does this guide highlight?
Organization. They're really big on planning your content around specific learning outcomes.
So it's not just about cramming in as much information as possible. It's more strategic than that.
Way more. They talk about backward design. Have you heard of that?
I have, but I'd love to hear your take on it.
It's so cool. It basically means starting with the end in mind. So you ask yourself, what do I want students to be able to DO or understand by the end of this lecture?
And then you work backward from there.
Yeah. You structure everything, the activities, the information, the discussions to support those goals. Each piece has a purpose.
That makes so much sense. So intentionality is key. And this guide emphasizes that intentionality, even when it comes to how we actually deliver the material, right? They talk about breaking down complex topics.
Into smaller, more digestible chunks. It's like anything else. Information overload is a real thing.
And they're big on using visuals, handouts, technology.
Absolutely. Anything that can reinforce those key points and cater to different learning styles.
It's about making the information stick. Now, another thing that really stood out to me in this guide was the focus on student-centered learning. Why do you think they highlight this approach so strongly?
I think it reflects a bigger shift that's happening in education. We're moving away from this idea of students as, empty vessels that we just pour information into.
Right. It's not about passively absorbing facts.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that students learn best when they're actively engaged, when they're asking questions, exploring ideas, making connections.
So how do we actually shift to a more student-centered approach in a lecture setting? What does that look like in practice?
Well, for one thing, think about the types of activities you're doing. Are they encouraging students to simply memorize facts? Or are they prompting them to think critically and apply what they're learning?
I see what you mean. It's the difference between, say, lecturing for an hour straight versus incorporating a think, pair, share activity where students get to discuss concepts with each other.
Exactly. Or using online polling tools to get a real-time gauge of student understanding and encourage interaction. There are so many ways to make lectures more interactive.
This reminds me of other approaches I've heard about, like inquiry-based learning and project-based learning. Are those connected to this student-centered philosophy as well?
Oh, definitely. They all share that emphasis on student engagement and ownership of their learning. Students become the drivers of their own education, not just passengers. And that brings us to another really important point the guide emphasizes, bringing energy into your teaching.
And they don't just mean chugging an extra large coffee before class. Right. Although I've been known to do that.
Haha, we've all been there. They're talking about bringing a dynamic presence to the lecture hall, about using your voice and body language to captivate students' attention.
Imagine walking into a classroom where the instructor is genuinely excited about the material. That enthusiasm is contagious.
Exactly. Think about varying your tone of voice, using hand gestures, moving around the room, even incorporating a bit of humor. All of these things can make a huge difference. And guess what? The guide actually suggests recording yourself teaching and analyzing your delivery.
That's such a good idea. I know it can be a little scary to watch yourself teach, but it can be so insightful.
It really is. It's like holding up a mirror to your teaching practice and seeing what you can refine.
And speaking of refining, I bet this self-awareness also helps with another element the guide stresses, asking questions.
You're so right. This guide is all about the power of questions. It encourages lecturers to incorporate regular question and answer sessions throughout their lectures.
I'm curious to hear more about that. It seems like it's not just about the lecturer imparting knowledge, but about creating a dialogue with the students.
Precisely. Well-crafted questions can really spark curiosity and encourage deeper thinking, but it's not just about asking any old question. There's an art to it.
Oh, are there different types of questions we should be asking?
Absolutely. Think about open-ended questions to stimulate discussion, or clarifying questions to make sure everyone's on the same page, or even challenging questions to push those critical thinking skills. It's like having a toolbox full of different question types, each one with a specific purpose.
I like that analogy. And it's not just about the lecturer asking questions. The guide also talks about fostering an environment where students feel comfortable asking questions of each other.
That's key. Imagine a classroom where students aren't afraid to raise their hands, to challenge ideas, to build on each other's insights. That's where real learning happens.
It's a much more collaborative and dynamic environment. It's like shifting from the traditional sage on the stage approach to more of a guide on the side. The lecturer becomes a facilitator of learning, empowering students to take ownership of their education.
That's a perfect way to put it. And when students feel like active participants in the learning process, their motivation and engagement really skyrocket. They're not just memorizing facts, they're grappling with ideas, making connections, and constructing their own understanding.
This has been such an insightful conversation already. We've uncovered so many practical strategies for bringing energy and engagement into lectures. This guide from the European Association for Higher Education Advancement is truly a goldmine.
And it's not about throwing out the traditional lecture format altogether. It's about recognizing that we can enhance it, make it more dynamic and student-centered.
It's about recognizing that a lecture can be so much more than a one-way transmission of information. It can be a springboard for discussion, a catalyst for critical thinking, a shared journey of discovery. Out of all the strategies we've talked about so far, is there anything that particularly resonates with you?
For me, what really stands out is that overarching theme of student-centered learning. It's easy as educators to get caught up in covering the content, making sure we tick all the boxes on the syllabus. But this guide really reminds us to focus on the how as much as the what.
It's about creating an environment where students feel empowered to learn, to explore, to ask questions, and to contribute their own unique perspectives.
Exactly. And it's about remembering that every student walks into the classroom with their own unique set of learning styles, backgrounds, and experiences. So the question becomes, how do we take all of these insights and put them into action?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And thankfully, this guide doesn't just offer abstract theories. It gives us concrete, actionable steps that any lecturer can implement.
Oh, absolutely. Like we were just talking about, that idea of recording yourself teaching is something anyone can do, no matter what subject they teach or how long they've been teaching. It's a powerful tool for self-reflection and growth.
And it emphasizes the importance of being lifelong learners ourselves, constantly seeking to improve our craft and embrace new approaches.
Right, and modeling that love of learning for our students.
So true. As we wrap up this part of our deep dive into making lectures more dynamic, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to leave with?
I'd say it's this. Even small changes can make a big difference. You don't have to revamp your entire teaching style overnight. Just start with one thing, one small adjustment you can make in your next lecture to make it more engaging, more student-centered, more dynamic. What comes to mind for you?
I think it's so important to remember that every journey starts with a single step. It could be something as simple as starting your lecture with a provocative question, or incorporating a quick poll using a free online tool, or even just making a conscious effort to move around the classroom more and vary your delivery. Little tweaks can have a ripple effect.
I love that. And don't forget, the European Association for Higher Education Advancement has a ton of resources to help you on that journey. Check out their website for articles, videos, workshops, even webinars.
And make sure to connect with them on social media. They're building a fantastic community of educators who are passionate about making learning engaging. It's so valuable to share insights and challenges with each other. We could all learn so much from each other's experiences.
Teaching is definitely a team sport. We're all in this together, so keep experimenting, keep innovating, and keep sharing your passion for learning with the world. It really is. And it all comes back to like remembering that teaching is a craft. We can always get better, always refine our skills.
Absolutely. It's like any skill. Practice and self-awareness are key. And speaking of practice, one thing I wanted to circle back to is this idea of making lectures more dynamic. We talked about using our voice and body language, but what about the actual, content of the lecture?
Right, right. The guide actually has some interesting tips about that too. Like they emphasize the importance of storytelling.
Ooh, storytelling. I love a good story. How does that fit into a lecture, though? Is it about, like, telling personal anecdotes or...
It can be. Personal stories can be a great way to connect with students and make abstract concepts more relatable. But it can also be about weaving narratives into your explanations, creating a sense of flow and intrigue. Think about how history is taught. It's essentially a series of stories.
That's true. We learn about historical events through the stories of the people who lived through them. It makes history come alive.
Yeah.
So you're saying we can apply that same principle to other subjects.
Exactly. Even in like science or math, there are stories to be told. Stories about discovery, about problem solving, about the human element behind these disciplines.
I love that. It's about making the learning process more engaging, more human. And speaking of human, we talked earlier about the importance of student-centered learning. How does that play into this idea of making lectures more dynamic? Are there specific strategies we can use to create a more interactive learning environment?
Definitely. The guide talks a lot about active learning techniques, things like think, pair, share activities where students discuss concepts with a partner, or using online polling tools to gauge understanding and encourage real-time participation.
Oh, those are great. I've used Think, Pair, Share in my classes before, and it's amazing how much more engaged students are when they have a chance to process information with each other.
It's like they're becoming co-creators of knowledge rather than just passive recipients. And that shift in mindset can be incredibly empowering.
It makes the classroom feel more like a community of learners, which I love. It's not just about the lecturer standing at the front of the room imparting knowledge. It's about everyone working together to explore ideas and make connections. And technology can play a big role in that too, right?
Well, absolutely. There are so many amazing tools out there that can enhance student engagement and facilitate active learning. Think about online discussion forums where students can continue conversations outside of class, or collaborative document editing platforms where they can work on projects together in real time.
It's incredible how technology can bridge the gap between the classroom and the outside world, blurring the lines between learning and living. It's like learning becomes something that's happening all the time, not just within the confines of lecture hall.
I love that. And it goes back to what we were saying earlier about creating a more student-centered learning environment. It's about recognizing that students are constantly learning, both inside and outside the classroom. And our role as educators is to facilitate that process, to provide them with the tools and support they need to thrive.
It's about being more than just lecturers. It's about being mentors, guides, facilitators of learning. And that can be such a rewarding experience, both for us and for our students. We get to witness those aha moments, those moments when the light bulb goes on and a student makes a connection that they'll carry with them long after the lecture is over.
Those moments are what make it all worthwhile. They remind us why we do what we do, why we're so passionate about teaching and about creating those transformative learning experiences.
I couldn't agree more. This has been such a rich conversation, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of all the ways we can make lectures more dynamic and engaging.
There's so much more to explore, and I think the key takeaway here is that it's an ongoing journey. We're all constantly learning and evolving as educators.
Exactly. We're not striving for perfection. We're striving for progress. We're embracing the challenge of creating those magical learning moments, one lecture at a time. And that, I think, is what makes teaching such a fulfilling and inspiring profession.
I completely agree. It really is. And it's interesting because when we think about making lectures dynamic, we often focus on like the big picture stuff.
Right, like using cool technology or coming up with really creative activities.
Exactly. But sometimes it's the small things that can make the biggest difference.
You're so right. Like even something as simple as making eye contact with students or using their names when you call on them.
It's those little personal touches that can really create a sense of connection and make students feel seen and heard.
And that can go a long way in terms of building rapport and creating a more positive and engaging learning environment.
Absolutely. And another thing that I think is really important is to be mindful of our own energy as lecturers.
Oh, that's a good one. I know if I'm feeling tired or stressed, it definitely shows in my teaching.
Right. It's like students can pick up on our energy, whether it's positive or negative.
So if we want to create a dynamic and engaging learning experience, We need to bring our A game.
Exactly. We need to show up with enthusiasm and passion and a genuine desire to connect with our students.
It's like anything else in life. If you want to inspire others, you need to be inspired yourself.
So true. And you know what? One thing that always inspires me is to see the light bulb go on for a student when they finally grasp a concept that they've been struggling with.
Oh, those are the best moments. They make all the hard work worthwhile.
They really do. And, speaking of hard work, I think it's important to acknowledge that teaching is not always easy.
Yeah, there are definitely days when it feels more like a marathon than a sprint.
But even on those tough days, there's always something to be grateful for.
Like the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of our students.
Exactly. And to be part of a community of educators who are all striving to make the world a better place through education.
It's a privilege and an honor to do what we do.
I couldn't agree more. And as we wrap up this deep dive into making lectures more dynamic, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought-provoking question.
Okay, I'm ready.
What one small change will you implement in your next lecture to make it more engaging?
That's a great question, and one that I hope all of our listeners will take some time to reflect on.
Because even the smallest changes can have a ripple effect, creating a more positive and dynamic learning experience for both us and our students.
So true. And don't forget, the European Association for Higher Education Advancement has a wealth of resources available to support you on your journey to becoming a more dynamic and engaging lecturer.
Be sure to check out their website and connect with them on social media.
And thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful and inspiring.
We'll be back next week with another deep dive into a topic that's relevant to educators everywhere.
Until then, keep those classrooms buzzing with energy and engagement.
Please don't forget to follow the European Association for Higher Education Advancement on YouTube and social media.